Hello, I am Erk Pod and welcome back to Erk Pod. This is a brand new introduction because I did have some issues during the recording of this episode, and this is why I decided to record this episode at home, because I'm trying out a new audio face, as you'll hear during the episode. The initial recording, which was a feature about the particular audio interface that I'm using, that is there. But unfortunately, about after the 16-minute mark, whatever button I pressed caused the recording to be basically a flat line after roughly the 16-minute mark. So I had to basically scrap the majority of the recording, which I'm going to record again for an episode. So just to give you some context, Erk Pod originally was an audio-only podcast, but today in 2025 I am also using video as well as audio. If you are listening to this on the audio podcast, this will tell you more about the interface and some of the podcasts that I'm listening to. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll see one of two things on this episode. You'll either see information about whatever it is that I'm talking about at the time. So whether it be the podcast that I'm talking about, whether it be the interface that I'm talking about in this instance, or what else will be appearing on the screen is a series of videos that I took in August 2024 for my transport channel, A Mountain of Work. And it was using a set of 3 cameras called eMeet, mainly meant for doing conferencing and live video in a office or a conference room type environment, where a person could have these 3 cameras wirelessly hooked up to the phone and then select whichever camera they wanted. And so on these instances that you'll see in this video, you'll see, first of all, you'll see some scenes from the centre of Newcastle. 3 separate cameras. I'm based at a particular intersection where the light rail / tram line runs, and so you'll get to see lots of buses, cars and trams in the area. And then later on in the episode you'll also see, as I move on a separate day towards the foreshore of what I like to call the Newcastle Harbour, but is effectively the Newcastle end of the Hunter River. So that's a slight explanation of what's coming up on this episode. So let's get to the first intro. Hello, I'm Erk Pod and welcome to this episode of Erk Pod. Doing things slightly differently today. Just trying out something new to see if I can hit the road and do Erk Pod on the road a lot easier than I would have been able to back in the audio days. Anywho, I am using I don't know if it's pronounced Fifine or Fifine audio interface. And it's got a input for an XLR microphone, and then I've got a line in, a line out, and I've also got a USB-C which I've got connected between the interface and the iPhone, and I'm at the moment just recording on the Voices app, or the voice memo app on my iPhone. So there's 4 separate channels that I can use, and there's also a monitor on top so I can see how well my voice or the sounds are projecting at the time as well. Effectively, I've got 4 channels. One for line in, one for line out, one for the XLR input, and one for headphone monitoring. And I do have a mute button on the line in, line out and XLR, and I can turn mic monitoring on or off. Now that already sounds fantastic, and I don't know how my voice is sounding compared to usual, but there's some even more features that this little interface can do, which I picked up on Amazon. And how I picked up on Amazon, and how I do a lot of my shopping these days, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on your point of view, is that I will be scrolling Facebook, and then I'll say, "Oh, that looks like a good offer, or a good idea, or a good solution to a problem that I'm already having, or a good alternative to a thing that I've done in the past." And then I will have a look at that particular ad, and I'll work out how much that is going to cost. Is it coming from Australia? Is it coming from overseas? How much is it going to cost? When's it going to get here? And then I'll go on Amazon and I'll do a comparison. And a lot of the things, but not all the things, I can get on Amazon next day. For instance, this morning I purchased a magnetic screen for my iPhone, like a magnetic monitor for my iPhone. So if I am using this out in the field, I can use that screen to monitor what I'm seeing. And it just attaches to the back of the iPhone. I'm using an iPhone 16 at the moment. I've also got an iPhone 10, which I'm just using to listen to podcasts, and that will be the second part of this episode, what podcasts I'm listening to at the moment. But we'll talk more about what podcasts I'm listening to a little bit later on. I've also got somewhere in the studio, there's an old iPhone 6 that I was using to listen to podcasts after I upgraded to the iPhone 10. And today I found my first iPod Touch, which the time is well and truly out. It thinks, hang on, what time does it think that it is now? And when does it think that it is? Because it's not actually connected to the internet at the moment. I'll just turn it on. I've been recharging the battery, and I can't believe how small this iPod Touch is compared to my iPhone 10 and my iPhone 16, how small it is, as I wait for it to turn on. I'm recording this in early May. What's the date today? I know it's a Wednesday. It's the Wednesday, 7th of May, as I'm recording this. So I'm in the middle of charging up this iPod Touch merely because I can. Okay, so my iPod Touch thinks that it's 14:09, so 2:09 in the afternoon. Now, what date does it think that it is? Now, it thinks, and this is because this is probably the last time it was turned on, because it's not connected to the internet at the moment, it thinks that it's Wednesday, the 2nd of December 2020 at 2:09 in the afternoon. But obviously that's not the case at the moment. So I'll try and connect to my Wi-Fi, and then we'll hopefully see it reconnect. Oh, it is so small compared to my iPhones. If you've got small, dainty fingers, and you just want to play some music or some podcast, well, that's Not a bad option, assuming that everything still works, considering that it thinks that it's in 2020. 2021 wasn't much better, Mr. or Miss iPod Touch. And the problem with such a long password, I think I've almost finished typing in my password for my Wi-Fi. And if I get this first go, I remember last week I was trying to put in my credit card details to do a transaction. Incorrect password. Well, I'm not surprised. My fingers aren't the smallest in the world. So I'm trying to type really slowly, see what letter actually comes up. And it will be interesting to see, and I'll have a look in a moment, when I connect to the internet, what version of iOS this is actually running. Okay, second time lucky. We are connected to the internet, and it has now got onto the correct time, Wednesday the 7th of May 2025. It's just advanced 5 years by connecting to the internet. We're not going to do our Apple ID verification now. Let's see. What iOS are we running? I've only got 5 applications on here. I've got 677 songs. Software update. Checking for update. Of course, there is going to be an update on a software update. So it's telling me to upgrade to iOS 12.5.7. And I've got 11 gig out of 16, mainly with songs. It's interesting. It's not telling me what version of iOS I'm currently running. Which is interesting. Alright, so that's that. What songs have I got on here, by the way? That'd be an interesting. Classical music videos, top 25 played, purchased music, and Terrace House song list. Probably nothing I can play on here, probably something I've got on my other iDevices anyway. Alright, so let's have a look at this interface. By the way, it's going to be a bit of a mystery about which video I'm going to have with this. Probably one of my watching the world go by scenery videos from a mountain of work. That's probably what I'll do. But what else has this interface got? If you need something with phantom power, there is a phantom power button on here, on this interface. There's a button that's labelled electric, and then there's four custom keys, and one of them I used to play the theme for Erk Pod. and that lasts for a maximum of 15 seconds. So custom A, B, C and D. There's another button because it's got lights in it, so you can change the lights on the buttons for various colours. I like the red on the black background of the interface. And then you've got a change voice button, which I'll go into in a moment. But first, I want to hit the electric button. What is the electric button, I hear you ask? Now, it's an electric tone. There are 12 kinds of tones with corresponding indicators, only available for microphone recording. So if I press, I'm not using the electric mode at the moment, but I believe that there's a change to my voice once I hit one of these buttons. So I'm going to press the electric button now, and the first light that comes up is a capital A. To get more detailed operations, please refer to function key instruction on page 9 to 14. 48 volt phantom power. Transmit phantom power to the condenser microphone. Please check if your XLR condenser microphone needs 48 volt phantom power to avoid damaging your device. Make sure to turn off the function when not required. That's obviously different to my normal voice. Now I'm going to press the next one, which has a capital B and a small b next to it. Electric button switch electric tone. There are 12 kinds of tones with corresponding indicators, only available for microphone recording. Customize button. Used to customize sound effects recording and playback. RGB switch, button switch, mode or colour. There are 5 kinds of modes, including colourful flowing, single colour changing, single colour breathing, single colour marquee, and static colour option. So I'm going to go to the next one, which just has a capital B. Voice change. Voice change mode. There are 6 kinds of voice modes, including male, female, robot, monster, baby, and elder. So is there somewhere that actually explains what these different letters mean? Because it folds out. Let me see. Function key instruction, RGB instruction, customize button, electric button. All it says for electric button is short press to turn on electric tone, long press for 2 seconds to turn off. Interestingly, somewhere else in the instruction manual it says electric tone and voice change function cannot be used at the same time. Please select one of them to use. Computer setup, voice change, 4-channel design, mic, monitor, mute, control, output settings. Tips applicable for Mac and Windows, so you can use it with Mac and Windows. You can use it with broadcast software such as OBS, which is what I use to produce videos. Audacity. Is Audacity still a thing? Clearly it is. Let's try on it. So I don't see anywhere where it explains what those different electric tones are. There are 12 kinds of electric tone options. Short press to switch tone corresponding indicator will light up, only available for microphone recording. Electric tone and voice change functions cannot be used at the same time. When you use electric tone, you cannot use voice change. But it doesn't tell me anywhere that I can see what button means what tone. Alright, I'm going to press the button now for electric and move to a capital C. Okay, let's record now what I did actually record before, and hopefully not press the wrong button. And I don't know which button I pressed because I wasn't monitoring the audio on the phone that I'm recording into. I'm basically recording using a headset mic plugged into the interface, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, and there's a USB cable connected from the phone to the interface. But I wasn't, and I'm just trying to adjust my microphone here. I might need to adjust my levels slightly, but this is why I'm trialing this now at home. I'm not actually recording this in the Erk Pod studio, but I am recording it in my bedroom actually. And what I thought that I'd just record it. This would simulate a mobile environment, and it would simulate, in this instance, not having video available, but I am using alternative video sources. But the intention in the end would be to be on location somewhere, being able to use both video and audio functions, using the audio interface, and also using the phone camera or possibly the eMeet cameras to bring you a vision of where I am at the particular time. So I don't know what button I pressed, but I did want to press some buttons because that's part of the idea of the episode before we talk about the episode. I'm not going to press the phantom power button because my headset mic doesn't need phantom power. The electric button could be interesting, and I'll be carefully monitoring this time the various. I'll be looking at the various waveforms, or waveforms, maybe. I don't know. Shauna, help. But there's several different buttons I can press here. So I press the electric button the first time, and it changes my voice somewhat. I'm not exactly able to tell you what it's done to my voice, but it's done something to my voice. And the waves, they are still producing. And the waves, they are still producing even though I've pressed the button again. I'm not sure if that's really a noticeable change from one button push to the other, because there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 different presses of the buttons that I can do to alter my voice somewhat, but it's still recognisable as my voice. So there might be a bit of reverb, there might be a bit of EQ. The instruction manual doesn't really tell me what each of these buttons do in terms of, okay, position or button press 1 of the electric is this, button press 2 is this, etc, etc, etc. But I dare say that it might be slightly different. I am getting some waves, so that's good, and I'm happy about that. And hopefully these waves will translate, and they should translate to actual audio by the time I stop the recording. So we've got the phantom power button, the 48V button, the electric button. Let me just get back to my normal voice, or just hold it down, that turns it off. There we go. So we're back to my ordinary voice. Now there's 4 custom buttons, A, B, C and D, and I found out that these only take 15 seconds of audio. So if I press custom A, this will give us the new theme for Erk Pod. Okay, so that was custom A. I haven't got anything set for B, C or D yet, and in all honesty I probably won't. On the right hand side, it looks like a sun button, and that adjusts the lights, and there's various light settings that you can set. I'm personally loving, because it's a black interface, I'm personally loving the red buttons. I'm quite liking that at the moment, so I'm not going to change any of that. Let's go to the voice changer, which was one thing that I was interested in to see how that would be done. I know some people really like changing their voices on podcasts. I don't tend to. Sometimes I'll just exaggerate my actual voice, but it's still obviously me. So there's 6 different modes. And so
what this one reminds me of, and I've got to turn the mic monitor down, otherwise it's hard hearing myself back when I'm talking like this. This reminds me, they'd say on a radio station, we need to disguise this person's voice, so we'll put a voice changer on. And that's exactly what this sounds like. So, who knows, might have to use it, probably won't, but it's an interesting effect. The one that I actually liked the most when I first listened to this yesterday at the day of recording was actually the female voice.
So I turn up the female voice, and it's the female version of the voice changer, but then again, yes, I do have to turn the mic monitor down. Or what I could also do is just press the mic monitor button at the bottom of the interface on each channel, and then I don't actually have to listen back to or monitor what I'm saying, which is handy because it is distracting hearing these voices and trying to talk at the same time. The next
one. What's the next one? I am a robot.
in case you didn't understand what I said, that was the robot voice. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, that was the robot voice.
This one is the monster voice. So this one's the monster voice. It's the mash. It's the monster mash. It's the mash. 5, 4, 3, 2, monster mash.
The baby one may be passable. I'm not expecting to use any of these, but for some people, this button, the voice change button, may have been the total reason that you decide to get this interface. But having said that,
this is the elder voice. So elderly voice, probably me in 20 years, I'd say. Who knows?
But some people may have got this interface simply for that, and I didn't buy this interface just for that, but I purchased it and I made sure that I got one with the XLR input. So if I am out on the road and I want XLR quality audio using my headset mic, well, I can take it out on the road and I can plug it in and I can go from there. And it's basically the size. If I lay my hand sideways, I've got a fairly large hand. That's basically the size of the unit, which is pretty small. Doesn't necessarily need batteries. It's running at the moment off the phone battery because it's connected to the phone via the USB cable. So that's totally fine. So overall, as I said, I did want to test it out before I went into an operational environment to make sure that it works. I'm not sure what button I pressed or whatever to cause the failure of the previous recording, but this recording is looking a lot better on the WAVs at least. So I can confirm that the WAVs are working fine. I did stop the recording just to make sure that the waves are working fine, because I didn't want to record for about an hour again and to find that that was a waste of time, because I didn't have any waveforms. I just had a flat line. So that's reassuring. Anywho, let's talk about the main thing that I would have talked about at some stage, but I thought I would combine it with the test of the new interface. And we're talking about podcasts. I've been a podcast producer since 2007, with the exception of what did I work out to be earlier? 2014 to 2025, so an 11-year break. With the exception of that 11-year break, I've been a podcast producer since 2007, listening to podcasts slightly earlier than that. Used a couple of different podcast apps over the time. I was using the Apple podcasts to start with, and iTunes to listen to podcasts. But ages ago, I found Pocket Casts, and I've still been using it to this day. So, quite happy to use Pocket Cast. Before we talk about some of the podcasts that I'm listening to, let's have a look at some stats, which will be quite interesting. And it tells you something about my podcast listening habits now. Now, at work, I can listen to podcasts when I can. Just use a Bluetooth speaker. Sometimes I'll listen to podcasts at home. Other times, just depending on what mood I'm in. Sometimes I'll watch YouTube videos. Sometimes I'll listen to YouTube videos. Sometimes I'll listen to music. So it all depends. So I am listening to and consuming a lot different than I did in 2006, 2007. I don't basically watch any TV. Anything that I watch on a screen is basically YouTube. I do have YouTube Premium, which is awesome because that means you don't get all of the ads. And I understand sometimes that it is frustrating for people who don't have YouTube Premium. And a lot of the time the creators have no input into what the ads are or when they appear. So I do feel your pain. So having a look at Pocket Casts, I have, at the moment on my phone, I have 23 new releases. I have 2,361 unplayed episodes. I have 516 downloaded episodes, and I'm actually downloading one as we speak. So on my Pocket Cast account at the moment, I've got 35 podcasts that I have saved. Not all of them I listen to at any one time. A couple of them are my own for historic references, and also if you do have a podcast, I think it's important to subscribe to your own podcast, download it and listen to it. There have been podcasts that I have had interactions with recently that they've had issues with their product that they've actually put out, but they're doing it more from a live point of view. And for them, yeah, it sounds great live, awesome. But something's happening between the time of the live production and uploading, because the audio sounds totally different. And if you listen to that on a podcast, you'll hear it. Whereas, you've just got the show that you've uploaded and you haven't listened to it, you might not pick that up. So, some stats. I have listened. Okay, so this is from 1st of November 2016. And I presume, but I could be wrong, I presume that's when I got Pocket Cast. So I have listened to 1,066 days and 6 hours worth of podcasts. I have saved 2 days and 18 hours by skipping ahead. I have not use variable speed much. There used to be one particular podcaster ages ago, and I'm not even sure if he's still podcasting. Let me have a look. I'll have a look if the guy's still podcasting. He was known as the podcast answer guy, Cliff Ravenscraft. Well, he still seems to be active. He's got some recent YouTube videos up. He's got just over 8,000 followers on YouTube. But why I mentioned Cliff, and I just remembered it, and there's a lot of different podcasts that he's produced over the time. I was listening to him when I first found him as a podcast answer guy, and then very early on, I just tried as an experiment to increase his speed because his episodes from memory were long. And I put it up to 2 times speed, and I thought, this actually sounds good to listen to. There's some podcasts that you can listen to, if you double the speed, it becomes unlistenable. But with Cliff, it was amazing because it actually added to the energy that he was conveying about podcasting. And then I met him at New Media Expo, I want to say 2013, 2014. And it was interesting because I listened to him speak, and then we went out for dinner, a big group of us later. I'm pretty sure Jeff, the airline pilot guy, was there as well. And it was weird because I wasn't listening to the Cliff that I'd been listening to over the previous year at double speed. I'd forgotten what his normal voice sounds like. So and his normal voice wasn't bad by any stretch of the imagination, but your ears do get used to a certain tone. So if you constantly listen to a podcast at double speed, and then all of a sudden you get to meet them and they're talking in their normal voice, it was weird for me to think, hang on, this isn't the guy that I've had in my ear pretty often over the last year before meeting him. And if you want to listen to something funny, instead of speeding up the podcast, if you want to slow it down and slow it down to half speed, there could be some rather humorous things that sounds like somebody's drunk. I've done that on more than one occasion to a few different podcasts that I've listened to for shits and giggles over the time. So did I have any more stats that I needed to share? So in total, I've saved 2 days and 20 minutes in relation to skipping ahead. I tend not to skip ahead these days. There are some long form podcasts that I listen to and that I enjoy and that I listen to hear the whole story, and I want to hear in the person's voice and the guest's voice, so I don't want to speed them up. And coincidentally, there's some podcasts and some audiobooks, for instance, that if I want to sleep, and if I grew up like we all do, but some of us grow up, we need to hear voices, or we need to hear music, or we need to hear white noise to get to sleep. Mine was hearing conversations and talkback radio, and to a lesser extent music. So there'll be times, even now, that I'll listen to certain podcasts, and I like listening to these podcasts, and I often listen to them when I'm awake and doing things. but sometimes I just want to listen to a podcast that I'm familiar with, and even if I've heard it before, or it might even be the first time that I've heard a particular episode, and I'll put that podcast on, and if I fall asleep, when I fall asleep, that's great, and then I'll go back and I'll listen to the episode again. And some audiobooks too, where I do the same thing, is amazing. For instance, the voice of Sir Trevor McDonald. Oh man, you listen to that guy's voice. And while you're trying to sleep, and it's like a velvety voice. And the funny thing is, the way I discovered listening to him, because I purchased his autobiography to listen as an audiobook, was on YouTube, and it was a show that he'd done about Indiana's toughest prisons, I think it was, and there was another one where he was talking to death row prisoners in Indiana, and you've got this guy talking to mass murderers and big tough criminals, and you get his voice. Think something like Samuel L. Jackson, for someone who you may be a bit more familiar with, and he's a really thoughtful interviewer, and I listened to his autobiography on audiobooks as an audiobook. And for instance, interviewing Nelson Mandela after he was released from jail as one of many highlights. But at some stage I will tell you about audiobooks that I've been listening to, and also YouTube channels that I watch, but for today we'll concentrate on podcasts. And so I'll do what I did in the recording that didn't really work earlier, and I'll talk about, to start with, quiz show / trivia / entertainment. And the one that immediately comes to mind that have been listening to for quite some time, there's some episodes where I'll go back and listen to again, and it's called Good Job Brain. Now, Good Job Brain is a fantastic Good Job Brain is a fantastic podcast. They have been recording for quite some time now. The last episode that came out was on the 1st of January 2025. And this is what I should absolutely do this time compared to what I did last time, and actually read you the description, and I'll talk about it from there. Part quiz show, part offbeat trivia, and all awesome. We here are nuts about trivia and pub quiz, and we are damn sure that there are people out there who share our unusual obsession. Play along and laugh along as Karen, Colin, Dana and Chris school each other on some of the weirdest and most interesting facts about our funny little world. Do you relish beating your friends at Trivial Pursuit? Do you blab out the answers at the gym when Jeopardy is on? And don't you just loathe badly worded questions? Then this podcast, fellow trivia nut, is the ultimate mental nutrition for your very big brain, so eat up. So the last episode was released on 1st of January 2025. Now, since that description was written, Dana's actually left the show, but I'm sure if she was available, they'd welcome her back with open arms, and I'd welcome her back with an open ear. And this is often what happens with podcasts. They, it is a time-consuming thing to get everybody together. Life often gets in the way, and I know it's a bit of a cliche, but life gets in the way, and that's exactly what's happened with Good Job Brain, with all of the hosts having children, And so that means that they don't have as much time as they usually do. So what they tend to do now, they tend to record in seasons. They tend to record in seasons now, and so they'll do a batch of recordings. And so it's not necessarily weekly anymore, but there's nothing wrong with that. What they do is that they'll have a set topic, and this will give you an idea of what these episodes are like in relation to a regular episode. Trivia hard mode activated. Yes, for the first time in 12 years, we're slapping on a difficulty disclaimer. Nothing sinister, just a coincidence that we all went a bit nerdier than usual. So why not listen to us flail at computer trivia? Take Karen's exhaustively comprehensive movie robot voice challenge and see if you can identify the actors behind the voices. Learn how the toy industry is to blame for the worst computer ever existed. And very, very aptly, Colin made his computer quiz while walking around in the heart of Silicon Valley. Also, the return of the off-topic music round expertly crafted by Chris, but there is no Fleetwood Mac. So that's episode 283, Getting Personal with Computers. But every fifth episode, they have an all-quiz bonanza. And so they'll have basically lots of different topics. And so in episode 280, for instance, which is All Quiz Bonanza 56, Karen talks about industry and science. Chris talks about hanging letters on the Christmas tree. And Colin gets musically inspired by his wife's mail. And also a really cool segment that they do from time to time, and they have to do from time to time. And they've called it Actually. Actually. So it's where they've mentioned something on a show and they basically get fact checked on it, and then they decide to come back and go, well, actually in episode 279 we said this and we were wrong, so actually this is what it's actually about. So that is Good Job Brain, goodjobbrain.com, and the first podcast off the rank. Now we'll stay with the trivia theme at the moment, and we'll move into more of a comedy / history trivia podcast, which may not be to everyone's liking, because some people, they really like just having the facts, nothing but the facts, sort of more of a straighty 180. So if you're a straighty 180 podcast listener, you might not want to listen to Do Go On, but I find that they do have lots of interesting stories. Now, for instance, one of the last episodes that I listened to was episode 497, which was the Clinton Lewinsky scandal. And they do note that the report starts at approximately 7 minutes 37 seconds. They are really good at going onto tangents. And it's not surprising in a way, because when you have 3 comedians as hosts and then you have special guests that come on, there's no wonder that it gets a bit loose from time to time. A fact-based comedy podcast. Each week, Melbourne comedians Matt Stewart, Jess Perkins and Dave Warnocky take it in turns to research a topic and report back to the class. Some recent episodes that they've done. There's an episode which I've got coming up to listen to about Abraham Lincoln. I just listened to one about Tom Slick Yeti Hunter. One which was very entertaining The Kelly, aka the sex raft, which was interesting. The Press Yark scandal, and there's been quite a few. The mystery of the Sri Lankan handball team, the Woolworths Christmas bombings. So it's not necessarily all about people or events you've heard of. You may have heard a little bit about the events, but not much. And so do go on. Give it a listen if you like fun facts. You might want to read through the list of topics. Pick something that you know a little bit about, and then go from there. Each episode tends to go to between 2 and 3 hours, but there are some segments towards the end where they talk about feedback and giving shout outs for their Patreon members. So you might just want to listen to just the actual report. That's up to you. But that's do go on. And so it's one of the Australian podcasts. Do go on pod.com, and I'll have links to all of these shows in the show description. So an honourable mention to misinformation. Now, I used to listen to misinformation a lot, but as I mentioned with Good Job Brain, sometimes life gets in the way. Families get bigger, all that sort of thing. And it's been quite some time since the last episode of Misinformation, which is the main reason that I don't listen anymore. It's not because it's a bad podcast, it's just that there's not enough episodes. A trivia podcast for anyone who loves cool trivia and sticking it to annoying teams at pub quiz. misinfopod.com. But there's some very, very funny moments here, and lots of topics that you may not be aware of. Special guests come in from time to time. They actually get their husbands to come in to host a Mr. Information show on April Fool's Day, which is quite cool. But lots of different episodes to listen to there if you're looking for another trivia podcast. All right, let's go. Let's double check to see that we haven't. No, we haven't really missed any other trivia podcasts. Let's talk aviation, because it's one of the things that I'm interested in, but I'm not necessarily involved in. And I did actually apply many years ago, part of a traineeship, to get my commercial pilot's license and also do part-time work in retail at the same time, but I didn't get that position. And fortunately for me, trains came up, and that was a lot better for me. The main aviation podcast that I listen to now is the Airline Pilot Guy Show. And needless to say, it's an aviation podcast. The view from our side of the cockpit door, airlinepilotguide.com. Now, I actually met Captain Jeff a couple of times when I was in America. The last time was in 2014, living at Atlanta, Georgia at the time, flying for a certain well-known company that now is retired and has been retired for a while. He's quite comfortable with saying who he used to work for, but obviously not while he was an active employee. But it's interesting that the two major people on the show who were airline pilots have now retired. Captain Nick and Captain Jeff, they've both retired, but they've still got ties with the industry. Lots of people within the industry that they still know, and they often still talk about news and current events in the aviation industry. So they've just released, yesterday as I'm recording this, Airline Pilot Guy episode 661, which is entitled Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. It's a long episode. About 3 hours is their ceiling. But there's lots of interesting facts and figures and information about incidents that have occurred. And unfortunately in aviation there seems to be a lot of them lately, which is quite sad. So how I found, I should tell you this Captain Jeff story while I'm here. I met up with him in Vegas for New Media Expo a few years ago, and in 2014 I went down to Atlanta to catch up and say hi and hang out down Atlanta way. And we were going to watch the Super Bowl together at Hooters. I forget, 2014 Super Bowl. It wasn't the Super Bowl where I was watching from Mexico City, where suddenly people cared about New Orleans that it had power. But we were going to watch the Super Bowl together because he had a day off. But what ended up happening was that he ended up getting a phone call from his airline and saying, Captain Jeff, would you like some overtime on this particular day, which happened to be Super Bowl Sunday. So he did the right thing, and he says to me, mate, I've been offered overtime. And I says to him, okay, mate, that's cool. You go do your overtime. It's fine. I don't want to cost you money, entertaining me. That's cool. I'd rather you go out there and earn some extra coin. And especially considering for airline pilots, an overtime flight might not necessarily be just the 1 day trip. It might turn into a 2 or a 3 day trip, or maybe 4 day trip. So I'm like, no, you definitely go right ahead. And it was cool that we got to hang out at all. So I'm like, yeah, that's cool, mate. You go right ahead. So when he retired, he went and purchased an RV and did some travelling around in his RV, and he's just moved back into an apartment near where he was living before. Found Airline Pilot Guy via Airplane Geeks. I haven't listened to the Airplane Geeks for a while, but they are still podcasting, and lots of good information about various things in the aviation industry there. One other podcast that I found via the Airplane Geeks was Plane Crazy Down Under. Now, they went on to a bit of a hiatus for a while, talking about aviation in the Australia, New Zealand and Pacific areas. And so I've just resubscribed to their podcast, and we'll see. And I'll take a listen back to that and see if I have to go back and find. Oh my God! Just as I'm recording this, they obviously didn't hear me, but good job, Brain. I've just released a new episode, episode 286. The secret's out. So there's some timing. So they must be starting a new season. But I'll be interested to go back through the back catalogue of Plane Crazy Down Under to see what I've missed since they've resumed, because some things will be timely that I really needed to listen to at the time, and then there's other episodes where they might not be so time sensitive, so I can listen to them at any time that I want, really. And so I'll go back and I will certainly do that. Another podcast that I just found, I had heard of them via the Airline Pilot Guy, the Stuck Mic Avcast. There was an interview that they did with the guys from Plane Crazy Down Under, so I wanted to listen to them, and I'll go back and listen to that, and then I'll wade through their back catalogue and to to see more about that. So that's aviation. Now, while we're talking aviation, I have noticed actually that there's not many train podcasts out there, and I did think about starting one at one time, but it didn't really take off, so to speak. And I didn't get around to recording episodes. That was about the time that I stopped doing podcasts, so it didn't really work. So there's a lot of different aviation podcasts out there, but there's also a whole heap of trucking podcasts out there. Some of them are done by industry type people, and others are done by everyday truckers. Now, the first one that I really listened to years ago was Trucker Tom. And so the bits of Tom's show that I really liked was he'd record often while he was on a break, or just recording using his phone while he was driving along. And so I'd like hearing about where he was going to, where he'd come from, what loads he was taking, any issues that he'd have, and all that sort of stuff. I'd really love to listen to that, and that could be the first half hour of an episode, and he could be recording 3 or 4 or 5 episodes a week. But then there was a point during an episode where he would talk about conspiracy theories and American politics and that sort of stuff. And, Tom's American, so you don't necessarily blame him for that. And, he'd talk about that at some length. And so, in the end, I was just basically listening to where he was and what he was doing in the truck. So, as it turns out, I was reading on Spotify, just going back to Spotify. And I do have to give the man this. He has done a truckload of episodes. The last episode they recorded about a month ago at the time of recording this was episode 2145, called 6 Months. And so what he's talking about there is he actually retired from being a trucker in July 2024. And so, needless to say, he's probably talking about his life since he stopped being a truck driver. At some stage there's, for some people it's a medical thing where they can't pass their work medicals anymore. And I don't know Tom's circumstance. I haven't listened for some time. I've just read the information on a screen on the Spotify website. So some people, they have to retire when they can't pass their work medicals. Doesn't matter if they're a truck driver, train driver, airline pilot, or whatever. And then there are other people in some industries. For instance, Captain Jeff, an airline pilot in America. They got a mandatory retirement age for pilots at the age of 65. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you can pass your medicals or not. 65, you're out as a commercial airline pilot. And he'd actually used, I think he managed a year before he was supposed to retire, as he was cutting out all of his leave. But yeah, at 65, doesn't matter what state of health you're in America at least, 65 and you're out. So yeah, it was interesting to read that about Tom, because I knew that he was older than me. Probably, I'd say he'd be 15 years or something older than me. And so, I thought, oh yeah, it wouldn't necessarily surprise me that he's retired at some stage. But yeah, just to actually see it there, it was interesting to see that has actually now retired. Oh, there it is. I'll subscribe to that and I'll catch up. I just want to find out. I just want to find out how he was doing and how he came across the decision to retire, because that's of interest to me. How, I like these occupation type podcasts, and when I get to some YouTube channels that I watch in a different episode, some of the YouTube channels that I listen to will be quite interesting when you talk about occupations. Talking of trucking, moving more to Australia now, and I found the Copy Southbound podcast as a result of listening to the night shift radio show on Triple M, where they would feature every Tuesday night a segment called Truckee Tuesday, where they'd talk to primarily the one person who was a former president of an industry organisation, and then via that show, the occasional guest, I found Copy Southbound. Now, what Copy Southbound is, and this probably tells us better, I'll just read the description. Copy Southbound is a podcast that immortalises the real-life stories from some of the great pioneers of the Australian trucking industry. It brings to life what they have experienced and have been able to achieve in such a demanding but rewarding industry, and enables their stories to live on forever and to be accessed by our future generations. So they release episodes every couple of weeks. Last episode was episode 114. They put a lot of excellent photos up on Facebook, for instance, to talk about the guests that they've had. Now, this one is a long-form podcast, and I often listen to it when I'm on a drive somewhere. And just to hear back a lot of the stories about what it was like in the older days, when the trucks today are so good compared to what they were in previous years, but you'd have to argue that the roads are a lot different. Lots of funny stories, lots of industry talk as well. So lots of different episodes to listen to, including some of the story behind the blockades, the Razorback blockade in 1978, which the anniversary for that has just passed, where there was lots of different places in Australia where there was actually a blockade because truck drivers were protesting against basically taxes that were aimed at truck drivers. And there was a big lot of competition between the railways and the trucking industry, and lots of taxes that make trucking difficult back in the day. And in some ways, there's things that have happened 40 years ago that are still in the industry today. But Copy Southbound, as I said, it's a long form podcast, very enjoyable to listen to. Talking to lots of different people and lots of different segments of the trucking industry. It's just not all the overnight interstater guys that they're necessarily talking to. So lots of different interesting people. Sometimes on the same episode they'll have a father and son talking about how the grandfather drove before that, and now the son's driving, and now the son's driving. But that's getting more difficult these days, whereas in days gone past, if your dad was a truck driver, he'd be able to take you to work and go for a ride in the truck and that sort of thing. But it's a lot more difficult to do that these days. Now, speaking of the blockade at Razorback, the On the Road podcast is a weekly podcast, and there's a lot of industry talk and industry news on this particular show. Some interviews and also some music released weekly. And on that podcast feed is an audiobook, Razorback the True Story. It goes for 6.25 hours, but it's a fascinating look back at what happened at Razorback in 1978 and how the Hume Highway, for instance, was blocked. I think it was about a week in total in the end, and the lengths that the truckers had to go through, and it was a lot of it was the owner drivers. It wasn't the big companies, and they would fly the truckers in helicopters from Razorback south of Sydney to Sydney to meet up with the politicians, and it took some time, obviously, but a fascinating story there. Lots of different interviews, points of view, and industry news if you're in the trucking industry. On a similar vein is Big Rig Radio. They have a series of different shows under the Big Rig banner, which incorporates Trucking Life magazine. I actually purchased my first ever issue of Trucking Life a couple of weeks ago. I like trucks. I've seen them going around. One of my uncles was a truck driver when I was a child, but his side of the family didn't really talk to my side of the family, so he wasn't the sort of person who would have invited me to go into the truck and go for a drive with him somewhere. He wasn't like that. If I had someone who was supportive in that regard, I might have been a truck driver instead of a train driver. But anyone who knows me knows that I've wanted to be a train driver since the age of 5. But having said that, I didn't, and I haven't come from a railway family. So my enthusiasm about it was by watching trains go past me, reading magazines, watching videos, etc. So I didn't have that industry background of growing up with someone in my family in the industry. So that's an interesting one there, because what's the expression that people often use these days? You can't be what you can't see. And so if you don't have any exposure to things, you might not necessarily know that they are around. So that's Big Rig Radio and also Trucking Life. When I saw the size of Trucking Life for $15, it's just not your average magazine that you read once and then throw away. And then I came to think about how much I would spend back in the day on magazines, read them once and then basically recycle them. And then you think about all the different magazines over the time that I'd purchased. And then I think about the amount of magazines that I've purchased now, and the 3 issues of Trucking Life that I purchased at the same time. I can't remember the last time I actually purchased a magazine prior to that. I did see two different issues there. Trucking Life mainly works on subscription these days and the occasional distributor, but a lot of it's done via subscription where they mail it out to you. They don't have a big network of distributors. So I purchased these couple of different issues, and then the lady at the counter says, "Oh, we've just got the new one that's just come in if you want that as well." So I'm like, okay, cool. So I have read through them, and it's great value for $15 for what you're actually getting compared to some other magazines that I've seen around the place. All right, where do we go now? Let's go from talking about being a truck driver and having no experience in, having anybody in a trucking family or whatever, And let's move to true crime, because true crime is a genre these days all by itself. And the main podcast that we'll start out by talking about, which leads me to some others. And there's so many true crime podcasts out there. There's I know I did buy a lot of the Underbelly books back in the day. Lots of different true crime books out there that are still being written to this day. There's a lot of TV shows, YouTube videos, etc. as well. But this is an audio podcast, I Catch Killers with Gary Jubelin. After 25 years working in homicide, former Detective Chief Inspector Gary Jubelin is sitting down across the interview room table from cops, crims, addicts, victims, small-time cheats and big-town lawyers, asking them to share their stories. One of the country's most popular, successful podcasts, I Catch Killers, reveals the reality of life and death inside the justice system. Gary talks about the big things with an open mind, good and evil, hope and suffering, joy, tragedy and redemption. And there's lots of different episodes. The last one out is episode 271. And to be fair, I have to be in a certain mood to listen to the podcast. But having said that too, often the episodes will be released in 2 parts. Even if they are a day or 2 apart, I want to make sure that I've got the second part ready to go, because I'll listen to the first part, which will be about an hour, and then I want to listen to the second part straight away. So I want to make sure that I've actually got the second half ready to go. Now, he doesn't mention it in his bio there for the podcast, but one of the reasons that Gary Jubelin became well known outside policing circles, there was the case of the missing boy William Tyrrell about 10 or so years ago now, and he disappeared off a property in northern New South Wales at the age of 3, and he's the boy in the Spider-Man suit that you'll see photos of often around about the time that he disappeared or his birthday. And nobody knows what happened. Nobody's been charged with his murder. They actually don't know if he's dead. There's never been any body found. It is complicated because we're talking about biological parents and foster parents. And then you've got other people in the small community where it happened that may or may not have been involved. And what ended up bringing Gary Jubelin down was that he recorded one of the suspects without the permission of the suspects, just using his mobile phone. Complaints were made, allegations were made, and he was actually arrested and charged, and he left the police. But to his credit, he's come back and he's forging his new life outside the cops, as he'd say. And he's not just interviewing former cops and talking about cases that he was involved in. He'll interview lawyers and people within the system, reformed criminals, victims. And so there was actually a fascinating series that he did over a series of episodes where he got to go inside a jail in Western New South Wales. But the whole idea of the jail isn't just to keep them locked in a cell for 23 hours a day, but to give them reason to want to come out, work on themselves, get better, and then get released and come back successfully into society. I should actually look that up as we're talking, and then hopefully I'll think of the name of the So there's lots of different. Okay, I'd Catch Killers is the main one. I'm just trying to find the spin-off that he did in relation to. There's lots of interest in his first and second wives on Google. But no, very, very interesting. Very interesting to listen to. He does talk to. He does talk about the William Tyrrell case and a few other cases that he's been on as well. Very interesting to hear the point of view of one of his ex-partners, who became a partner inside and outside of the office, so to speak. But very interesting. As a result of listening to his podcast, there's a couple of others that I've been listening to. If I just go back to that. Where are we? The Badge and Beyond, Cops, True Crime and Investigations, a couple of former Sydney detectives. As two highly experienced, skilled and ethical ex-police officers, we now run a private investigation firm called Precision Integrity Service based in Sydney, but operating around the world in select countries. A few years ago, we became very disillusioned after spending decades in the New South Wales Police Force and believed that we could be more effective helping people that needed our assistance by running our own operation. We started sharing some of our old policing and surveillance stories on TikTok, purely to get our stories out there with a view to entertain, inform and hopefully even improve the situation for some. And we were just a little surprised at how well our short videos have been received. We have been asked repeatedly to start sharing our stories in longer form, in a video and podcast, and so that is how the Badge and Beyond podcast series and YouTube channel began. And so then it turns into a bit of an ad for them, but apart from that, it's very, very interesting because they've got different things that you wonder about what it's like when you're a cop. For instance, what's it like to be involved in a pursuit? What's it like when you're thinking about wanting to leave the cops? They had a good episode about the Link Cafe siege, leadership in the cops, tales from working Christmases, what it was like to work at the police academy. And then there was a classic episode with this fantastic title, Operation Oops When the Plan Goes Wrong. So that's the Badge and Beyond. Speaking of William Tyrrell, I haven't listened to this one yet, but it's called Witness William Tyrrell. And so he disappeared on the 12th of September 2014. And so there's an 11 episode series based on that particular story, trying to figure out what the hell happened, where is this kid. As I said earlier, there's been nobody charged with his murder, his body hasn't been found, and there's been no real firm sightings. So that's an interesting one as well. But apart from that, there are a few others that I have been listening to that I think that I'll get to at a later stage. But there's just some of the podcasts that I've been listening to. Next time I talk about podcasts, I'll tell you a little bit more about some of the podcasts that make me laugh and keep me focused. So there's, as I said, there's quite a few podcasts that I listen to. There's some that I'm just starting to listen to, because every so often I'll try and find more podcasts to listen to, and so I'll tell you more about those next time. Anywho, I have been Eric Brook. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed the episode. Links to all of those podcasts in the show description. Thanks for watching. Ta-ta and farewell.